And although for us it's not about the individuals, it's not about who we are, I think it's important that people do know where we're coming from and understand some of our background and why we're willing to stand up and do this. So as Simon said, it is about a team, it is about saying we want a different world. But I want to say that it's not about us as individuals, it's about what we represent. And I think that's really important. So for Simon, he's a trade union activist, he's involved in cuts campaigns. For me, I got involved being active through the anti-war movement. I remember over 10 years ago watching television in horror. I saw the government, the political parties discuss going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and actually just being very shocked that in government we didn't have an opposition. There was huge numbers of people across the country that actually didn't agree with the war and thought it was illegal. The government and all the main political parties backed that war. And I think that's really why I got involved. So I have been and still am chair of Stop the War. And at the time when we were campaigning against those wars, we also said actually it's not just the war that we're against, it's the effects of that war as well. We recognise that actually if you go to war in the Middle East, if you go to war against the Iraqi people, some of that's going to come back to affect us in this country. And we've seen that. So we've seen the level of racism increase massively. We've seen the effects against our civil liberties. You've got this whole agenda where the government want the universities and schools to spy on young people. This idea where the government, ministers will lecture parents about, do you know what your young people are doing? Well, I'm sorry, when was the last time most people knew where their teenage kids were all the time? It's just not done. We go to university to learn new things, come up with new ideas, not to be, spied on by our lecturers and what have you. And actually it's great that some of the UCU members are standing up and saying, no, we're not going to do this. But really that's why I got involved. And, since then, we've had a huge, rise of racism, and in particular against Muslim people. Again, we knew that because we're in war with Iraqis who happened to be Muslim. All this thing about they're going to welcome us with open arms. They never did. We were an occupying force. Why would they welcome us? And then the only way the government could justify the backlash from the Iraqi people and the Afghan people is, oh, it's something to do with their religion. And when you start saying that, then clearly there's something wrong with Muslims in this country as well. But actually, I don't think what the government says is actually representative of what most people in Britain think. You see, especially in Manchester, we've opened our arms to people coming from all over the world. You only have to look at Russia not so far down the road where, what we've seen as the Curry Mile, which used to be people from the Asian subcontinent, actually now it's people from all around the world, but predominantly from the Middle East. Why is that? Because actually that's where the wars are, that's where people are having to escape. And they've been welcomed in this country. But it's not just wars, it's also dictators. So you've got a massive Syrian community now in Manchester, you've got a Libyan community. These people have escaped from wars in their country. Wars created by dictators who were backed for years and years and years by our governments. Let's not forget, everyone goes on about how bad Assad is, but now we're making deals with Assad to fight ISIS, the very people that we helped create by going to war in the first place. Let's not forget Assad was the guy that was involved in rendition rights. Yet 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Parliament were voting to go to war with him. So it's really, it's about that. That's why we're standing to say, actually, that isn't the kind of world we want to live in. And actually, that's not the kind of world that we represent. We are people that recognise that, the war on terror, which was introduced by the Labour Party, has just got worse through the Tory government legislation. And actually will continue to get worse and worse when we go into a general election where we know, actually, that the crisis has been brought on by banks, but actually the government isn't willing to put their hands up and blame the banks. So they'd rather we blame each other. They'd rather divide us and have us turn against each other than stand together and actually say that the banks are the problem, not us. It's the businesses, it's the likes of HSBC, the likes of the big corporations that don't pay their taxes. That means actually they're going to cut back on the welfare state. And at the same time as cutting back on the welfare state, they're willing to go to war. They're willing to spend huge amounts of money going to war. They're willing to wipe up huge amounts of tax fraud by various bankers and corporations, and yet they want us to pay, and they try to tell us actually we're all in it together. Well, actually, we are all in it together here as the working class, but I don't think we're all in it together with the banks, the millionaires, and the government. And that's actually why we're standing to say, actually, we are against racism. We stand up and say immigrants are welcome here. We've had a proud history of welcoming people from all around the world, and we will continue to do that. And at the same time saying we know who's to blame. It's the bankers, actually, and we will stand up and fight together, and that's why we're standing.